I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good evening, Bowling Green. Good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my rapidly healing co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are about to create an incredible hour of radio called For a Green Future.
And I am even more excited than usual to be here.
Yes, because you have not been here. You have been in a very different place.
Skilled nursing facility for, don't break your hip, people. It's
Good
not
advice.
a good move.
Good advice, Rebecca. Yeah, so we're really thrilled to have Rebecca back in the studio with us. And that means that you folks, it frees up our line because she had to call in before. So now you folks can call in 877-909-1007, 877-909-1007. And perhaps I should tell you what we're talking about. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of the birds that are coming back up from south, and the insects that are thinking about hatching out of their eggs, and the worms under the ground, and the bees that are still buzzing around in their hives getting ready to come out for the spring, and basically everyone and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together here on this wonderful planet called Earth. And we have a typically wonderful show for you today. First, we're going to chat just for the next 10 minutes or so. And then we have an interview with our good friend Stephany Seay from Roam Free Nation. She's going to talk about the recent developments with the bison in Yellowstone, because I kind of feel like that conflict is sort of a metaphor for the, conflict that we have with nature on all levels, because the way we're treating those Yellowstone bison kind of matches what we're doing to the rest of the planet, too.
That and Beowulf.
Beowulf, okay.
Yep. Because it's the whole thing in Indo-European mythology where nature is bad and has to be subdued and conquered by humans instead of working with humans,
Right. But things did not go too well for that subduing guy, as I recall, either.
Well,
So-
actually, he lived to be pretty old, and then
Didn't he lose some limbs or something? Or?
No, he tore some limbs off of the monster and its mama.
Oh,
But
okay.
eventually, he got taken out by a dragon in his old age because all of his warriors were little babies except for the one guy, and ran away. Left the old dude to battle a dragon by himself.
I see. Well, all right. Cautionary tale? I don't know. So anyway, after we hear from Stephany Seay, we'll hear from our fantastic advertisers and patrons. And then, Rebecca, it'll be your turn to take the mic. And what are we going to talk about this week?
We are going to talk about shrews of northern New York.
Shrews. Okay. And then it's ecological news, and unfortunately we've got a ton of ecological news, most of it bad, but there is a little gem in there, a little point of hope in the ecological news that we might still turn this thing around, even though it's getting closer and closer to the crashing part. But we are very happy to be here with you. Both of us are happy to be able to take your calls at 877-909-1007 on any environmental or ecological topic that you are concerned about right now. So, I've had an interesting week. I went, and we've reported before about SB 2, which is the bill that defines nuclear, coal, and gas as green energy, quote-unquote green energy. So I went and testified against it in front of the Ohio Senate on Tuesday, and the senators didn't ask me any questions or didn't do any comments. It was just like, next. And most of the people that were, of course, testifying were the big corporations, and they keep rewriting the bill to make it better and better for the utility companies. And the whole bargain, the whole great political bargain with all the citizens groups and stuff, is that supposedly this bill is going to get rid of the HB 6 subsidies for the coal plants, one in Ohio and one in Indiana. It's one of the most egregious parts of what's left of that horrible bill. And so far, Ohioans have paid $600 million in fees just to keep these old polluting coal plants running. And so that's the carrot that's been held out. So a lot of the citizens groups that would normally come out against a bill that calls nuclear, coal, and gas green energy have kind of held back because they really want that to happen. Unfortunately, as each rewrite comes along, the bill gets worse and worse for people and better for the utilities. And I would not be surprised if the final bill actually keeps those subsidies in place. So that was kind of depressing. But one kind of nice thing, on the way home, I saw a huge, healthy-looking bald eagle on the side of the road.
Cool.
Yeah, eating something. And, you got to take those... You got to take those encouraging signs. And I saw a couple more bald eagles a few days later.
Not to mention a very confident goose on the way in today.
That's true. There was a Canada goose right in the road here on Arlington. And it
had the confidence of a mediocre white man. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, it was pretty clear that it didn't really, it was not impressed by my minivan.
It was going to hiss and puff itself up and make us go away.
Yeah, so luckily we survived the confrontation, and so did the goose.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you got to take your encouragement where you can find it. And another encouraging thing that happened to me this past week, last night actually, we did a showing of Radioactive, the Women of 3 Mile Island, which was, we have had Heidi Huttner, the woman who directed it. We've had her on the show before talking about that movie, and it was just struck me again what a really great movie that is in terms of laying out basically the fact that the official story about 3 Mile Island, which was the nuclear disaster in Pennsylvania in 1979, where they had a nuclear plant meltdown. The official story is just basically lies, because they keep repeating, they've been repeating ever since 1979, that nobody was hurt by the 3 Mile Island meltdown. And yet, what has happened in the years since then is that people who were in the plume of radioactive gases that were vented from that nuclear power plant, people who lived in that plume have some of the highest cancer rates in the nation. And if you match the cancer rates to the direction that the plume went, it matches exactly.
It's a heck of a coinky-dink.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point where, you go outside that plume, like a county 10 miles away that wasn't in the plume, and their cancer rates are like lower than
Wow.
national average
Wow.
on either side. And so it's really super clear that the radiation that was released did in fact harm lots of people, and Dr. Huttner did a brilliant job of documenting that in her film Radioactive: The Women of 3 Mile Island. And it really, we had about 30 people there, and they did generous donations to help offset the cost of bringing the film in. The film is available if you want to watch it. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's in your local library. Probably has a copy, and it's I recommend watching it because of the important lesson there that we should never forget. And one of the mothers who's the stars of, there's 4 mothers that are the stars of this film that have been fighting for recognition since 1979. And one of her quotes always sticks with me. It's, "Trust nothing the company tells you and question everything the government tells you." And that's really important to do right now when the government is trying to push so many things on us, especially nuclear power. And that reminds me again that we're coming up on the 14th anniversary of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, where 3 nuclear power plants went into full meltdown and contaminated a huge swath of Japan. So once again, we're telling people on March 11th, the 24 hours of that, March 11th, we have what's called the Unplugged Nuclear Power Grid Electricity Boycott. And that's where we ask people to avoid using electricity from the grid as much as possible. There's 4 levels. Level 1 is just go around and turn off extra lights and stuff and just be consciously doing some conservation. Level 2 is severe conservation. Use candles instead of lights and don't use your television and social media. Level 3 is disconnect from the grid for 24 hours. And if you're going to do that, you be sure to have some backup power for your essentials like your freezer, your fridge, and your sump pump. And then level 4, which is the level I'm hope our household will be at, level 4 is to put more power back on the grid using solar or wind than you took off the grid that day. And so that's the level eventually everyone should try to get to. And so that's Unplugged Nuclear Power. And if you want more information, go to unpluggednuclearpower.com. Okay, well, that's about all I wanted to cover before we head off to our interview with Stephany Seay. Anything you want to share before we head off to the interview with Stephany, Rebecca?
I guess not.
All right, then, let's go to that interview now. Welcome back to For Green Futures. Could you please share with us your name and your organization?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. My name is Stephany Seay, and I'm the co-founder of Roam Free Nation.
There's been some recent developments over there with the Bison in Yellowstone. Could you share with us what's going on and what the situation is right now on the ground?
Yeah, it's actually been a really slow winter, but it was over the last week, buffalo started moving into the Gardner Basin. There's probably at least over 300 that are moving in there. Some are already in there. Some have already been captured. And then there's also buffalo moving into West Yellowstone, and one was shot today. So far, no buffalo have been killed by hunters in Gardner, but that could change any minute. And the Yellowstone National Park has captured at least 100. And today is March 7th, and they're about to capture even more. We have some people on the ground in the field and with our eyes on the trap, and another 50 about to be captured.
Mm-hmm. And what is the fate of the bison that get captured in these traps?
Well, and this is a trap that's inside Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is doing the capturing, and they will test these buffalo for the presence of brucellosis antibodies. And the unfortunate thing with that is that those that test positive, 99% of the time, they have antibodies. They have resistance to the disease. They're not a carrier, but they get killed as if it's a positive infectious test. So those that test positive will likely be shipped to slaughter by the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe. And then those that test negative will likely be pushed into the quarantine or domestication program. where they're, people, it's a greenwash program. It's totally human centric. These buffalo, they've lost their freedom. They're ripped away from their families. The families are torn apart. And then they go through years of testing, human handling, and many of them die in the process. And then they get trucked to reservations where they'll live behind fences for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people who care about this issue have seen videos, YouTube videos being shared of bison, quote, returning to tribes, unquote.
Right.
But they're returning to essentially domestication as opposed to the traditional relationship between humans and bisons in North America.
Right. And then they eventually are managed like livestock. The quarantine program is a livestock management paradigm. And it's not just, of course, we want buffalo to return to tribal lands, to all the lands that are their birthright, but through migration, through corridors, their migration of their own accord, by their own choosing, in their own time.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm glad your organization has people on the ground watching. This might be a difficult conversation, but I remember once upon a time the organization Buffalo Nation used to put themselves physically in between things like capture and hunters. And, it was part of that organization's goal. I remember many years ago when there was the outcry against the slaughter of Yellowstone bison happened. There were brutal pictures of bison being hunted and trapped, and people from all over the world kind of descended on Yellowstone to show up to try to help prevent that. And they did things like civil disobedience. I remember people built tripods and put them on the lands to try to block hunters. And is there anything left of that? Anything left of that in the organization?
in that organization,
Yeah.
no,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. In fact, there's support the treaty on.
Still, why do the bison have to leave the park? Why do they go to Gardner Basin?
Well, they're a migratory species, and Yellowstone is on a very, very high plateau, and the snows get really deep. And they're built for the snow. They're ice age mammals. They're built for the cold, but the snow gets so deep that they use their big heads and the hump on their backs to shovel the snow away to get to the grass below. But sometimes it gets so deep that it's really makes life very difficult, and it's hard to move through that snow also. So they seek lower elevation habitat where the grass is more available and more plentiful.
So in other words, they're just doing what bison do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And so right now, the state of Montana has a very strong anti-bison policy.
Montana livestock interest still. The majority of Montanans, if you're outside of the livestock industry, the majority of Montanans, over 75%, have twice, there's been two polls, and over 75% of Montanans want wild migratory buffalo. But it's the livestock industry that's driving all this madness. And they own the legislature. The governor, forget him. He's such a bad egg. He's terrible. So they don't, the people in power are the ones waging this war.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to remember that most of the people want this. And of course, the bison want to be able to roam as their instincts and as their cultural heritage leads them. But the state of Montana is actually suing for there to be fewer bison. Is that correct?
Yep. Montana governor, along with the Department of Livestock and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, which is crazy, are suing Yellowstone National Park for them to drive the buffalo population down to 3,000.
Mm-hmm. And every time you make a population smaller, it risks losing genetic diversity, right?
Yes. And not only that, they're also killing behaviors, you know. I mean, these are wild migratory buffalo. This is the last continuously wild population left in the country. And when you're killing buffalo that are doing the migrating, you're taking away those herd memories. You're taking away those teachers who would teach other buffalo how to do the same thing, how to find the best grass, the best water, the best path, you know? So you're losing not just genetic diversity, but you're also losing unique behavior.
I think it's kind of bizarre that, well, part of what we've been reporting on, of course, is the way the Trump administration is eviscerating the park system, you know, firing park rangers. But there still seems to be plenty of manpower to run this very complicated trapping and testing and hauling program.
Yeah, it's crazy. Apparently, buffalo slaughter is essential work.
Mm-hmm. So the idea that there might be some benign neglect here, that, you know, with maybe park rangers would be focusing more on protecting the people and visiting the park than herding the buffalo, that looks like that's not happening.
No.
I know that you have spent many years out there in the field with the buffalo and the bison, and could you just give us kind of a little bit of a taste of what it's like right now when you're out there in the wintertime in Yellowstone and, you know, the bison are migrating? Could you sort of
It's bittersweet. You know, you get up really early in the mornings. You drive around with your binoculars and your scope to look for buffalo. You check on the groups you had seen the night before, if they're still there or where they are, if they're in danger of hunters, you know, lining up to gun them down, or if there's activity going on at the trap. But other times, you know, you run into a group of buffalo and everything's just cool, everything's mellow, and you get to hang out with them. And that is like one of the best gifts in the whole world, is to sit and just be with the buffalo. But then, you know, when things happen, you break out your cameras and your video cameras and your still cameras. And, you know, when they're getting hunted, you're taking pictures and getting video. When they're getting captured, same thing. And then, you know, we're using all those images to show people what's actually taking place, what these buffalo go through and what needs to stop.
Mm-hmm. And there is plenty of room there, right? And I mean, not just Yellowstone, but even the surrounding national forest lands.
Yes. There's hundreds of thousands of acres that they could use.
Mm-hmm. So we could actually at some point start bringing buffalo back. I mean, there's nothing physically stopping us from bringing buffalo back to much larger numbers.
Other than the government
Mm-hmm.
and the tribes with guns.
The tribal response isn't just in one direction, right? There's sort of a spectrum of tribal responses to this idea that they get to hunt all the buffalo that leave the park.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tribal members, even those who have participated, who just don't like the hunt at all. They say it's not a hunt because it isn't. We know it's not a hunt, it's a slaughter. So there's definitely tribal members who do not like the hunt. But there's a lot who do, and they want to fill their freezer, and they've got a right to do it, even if it's not right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because, you know, this population is being considered for Endangered Species Act protection, which unfortunately the decision is going to be made while Trump is still in office. So I don't know. I don't think we stand a chance now.
And that decision's made by the Fish and Wildlife Service?
Yeah, by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And that'll be in 2026.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your organization and how people can follow what's going on there in Yellowstone.
Yeah, we're a roam-free nation. Basically, our main focus is the buffalo, the wild buffalo of Yellowstone. But we do, you know, help out with other campaigns to protect, you know, prairie dogs and whoever needs our help. We'll reach out for wild nature. And we work from the perspective of wild nature. We're buffalo centric, biocentric, and you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on the web, roamfreenation.org. You can find us on Twitter, and you can find us on Instagram. And then we just got a TikTok account too. So we'll be getting some stuff up on there. So,
And
and we
I know you guys just shared some of those pictures that were just taken of the bison out in the field.
yeah,
And
and that's she's one of our board members. She's the one who's out there on the ground with Roam Free Nation.
and one of the pictures that struck me was there was this picture of a wolf that was going by, and we focus on the plight of the buffalo here, but like your organization, that you'll help any critter that needs help. And I mean, we have to remember that the bison are part of a really complex, intricate system. That's, we focus on the bison, but they're just that one piece that you can pluck out, and having the bison there, it strengthens the entire system, correct?
Absolutely, they're a keystone species. But yeah, I mean, wolves are getting hammered in Montana.
Mhm.
It's been a bloodbath season for them, and it's gonna get worse so long as we have these jerks in office.
Okay, well, is there anything you'd like to add?
We've been trying to figure out a good take action, but with the current administration, it's really hard to decide on a decision maker to really put pressure on who's actually going to listen. But we're thinking that the court of public opinion is a pretty good place to start, which means people who are concerned about this should write letters to the editor, either of your local papers or find some Montana papers and write to them and share your concerns and your disgust and plead for these buffalo.
Okay. All right, Stephany, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you, folks, for listening to that interview. Yeah, it's getting kind of grim for the bison. Last winter they managed to get through pretty much unscathed, whereas the winter before, of course, was when they killed literally thousands of them. Let's hope that this winter's more like last winter than the year before. But what did you think? Give us a call, 877-909-1007. Okay, so now it's time to hear from our advertisers and patrons. For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. until 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come, explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Or you can call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And our show is also brought to you by our wonderful, wonderful patrons, people for whom I am more grateful every day. Our patrons are people who've gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future, up popped our Patreon page. They scrolled through and found a level of membership that matched their own budget, and they signed up. So every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, it comes over to us, and that is how we can keep bringing you this amazing show where you hear things I'm confident to say you probably have never hear anywhere else. So, and one of those things, probably no one else is going to be doing a program, a little talk about shrews, are they?
I think I have just a complete and total scoop here that it's nobody.
All right.
Nobody else is gonna. All right. So this segment is called "The Shrews of Clinton County," subtitled "Hey, what bit me?"
Ooh, okay.
So as you recall, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago, I referred to an incident from my childhood when I was living in upstate New York. I was around 8. and a shrew bit me. The cats had been chasing it, and I think I squatted down, and it ran under my legs, and then I put my hand down because I was going to pick it up or something, I guess, and it bit my finger very hard. And then the cats got it anyway, so we were able to get its head and send it into the rabies people so they could make sure it didn't have rabies. So, but we didn't have to kill it, and I did not get rabies. So I thought I would try to figure out what kind of shrew bit me, but this was more complicated than I thought. So a few general facts about shrews. They are tiny mole-like mammals, often mistaken for cats or mice, or rats or mice, not cats. They're not anywhere near as big as cats, thank God, because they're notorious for being aggressive for their size, thus the tradition of referring to women as shrews. Because really, there's a little bit of truth to that in that you got to watch the real tiny ones because, they've had to learn to defend themselves, real tiny women are dangerous, I think. I'm afraid of them personally. But, yeah, they're insectivores, unlike mice, which means if you see one in your house, really there's not going to be a large infestation of them unless you have a lot of insects in your house. The bad news is they're more likely to bite you. However, there's probably not going to be a lot of them living in your house. And they're not going to actually, they've been known to run up people's legs, too. Because apparently in the wild, they target predators' legs. Because that's really all that's within biting range.
Ooh.
However, yeah. So they're going to help you keep the insect population down, which is good. And they're not going to, get in your food and, eat your bread, eat your clothes, all this, chew everything up, They're not going to do that stuff. They're going to mostly behave themselves pretty well. Just give them some space. Encourage your children not to play with them based on personal experience. Yeah, they eat ants, worms, beetles, slugs, and moths. And they have to eat their body weight daily. So they're kind of living my dream. And as Joe mentioned, some of them are venomous. I looked it up, and they are not all venomous. And the venom is delivered by grooves in the sides of their teeth, is how that works. The symptoms of the a venomous bite include swelling and pain. And let's see, according to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, shrews are solitary, except for when breeding. They live under grass and leaf litter. They're active for all 12 months of the year. They burrow in the snow. They like moist habitats, and they breed March through August. They have 17 to 28 days gestation. That's how long they're pregnant for. 7 to 10 young, which are born naked, which technically everything is born naked, but these don't have any fur when they're born, is what they mean by that, technically. They're weaned after 3 weeks, and the females have several litters per year.
Wow.
So that's shrews. So first of all, I looked up what shrews live in northern New York, and I learned that in general, New York could be referred to as the state of 7 shrews, because there are 7 different kinds of shrews living there. So I asked my dad what he remembered about the shrew, because he was the one who had identified it as a shrew, and he doesn't remember much. It was shrew-looking. I don't know. He didn't remember anything about how long the tail was or how pointed its nose was or anything like that. So yeah, I asked him what he remembered about he didn't seem to remember much about my injury either, except for that it was, quote, a nasty bite, unquote. So I think there was some swelling. I do not actually remember it hurting a lot more than any other, cut of that size. So that suggests that it may not have been venomous. However, I don't know a lot of things. Like, okay, do you get the venom every single time one bites you necessarily? I don't think this is, they've only just discovered it. I don't think people know about this. But okay, the shrews that live in northern New York would be New York in general, in fact, would be the masked shrew, pygmy shrew, long-tailed shrew, smoky shrew, least shrew, an American water shrew, and the northern short-tailed shrew.
Wow, I had no idea there were that many shrew
4, 5,
species.
6, 7. Yeah, that's 7.
Wow.
Okay, so I did a little research. masked shrews live in the northern states, third of the United States, basically, according to www.esf.edu, and thus cannot be eliminated. And they are not, as far as I know, known to be venomous. That was not mentioned. Pygmy shrews live in the northern contiguous U.S., so Atlantic Canada and the northeast U.S., cannot be eliminated. Also, not venomous. The smoky shrew lives in the northeastern U.S., which New York State is a part of, and are not venomous as far as I know, so cannot be eliminated. The least shrew lives in the northeast U.S. and is venomous. So, just for argument's sake, we'll cross that one off our list as a suspect. I tried sitting them all, interrogating them like Hercule Poirot, but they didn't have much to say. So, yeah, the American water shrew lives in mountain ranges in the northern United States. It includes eastern New York and the Adirondacks. Now, we were not up in the Adirondacks, but we're not far from them.
Where were you?
Plattsburgh.
That counts as Adirondacks in my book.
Yeah. So, yeah. Also, they live in water a lot. However, the area we were in, we had our farmhouse, we had our little yard, and then we were surrounded by corn. I don't know how far we were from the nearest pond. We never went backwards through the cornfield and investigated very much. So I tentatively eliminated that one through the lack of water. I don't know, because this is a very imperfect system here. The northern short-tailed shrew lives in the northeastern United States and is venomous, so probably off our suspect list. And the long-tailed shrew lives in the northeast United States, including the Adirondacks, is, as far as we know, not venomous. So I managed crossing 3 off our list very tentatively. So, I narrowed the suspect list down by less than half. Not that impressive. So, yada, yada, all kinds of shrews could have bit me. Is the conclusion.
Okay. And I guess, it seems logical that if you have to eat your body weight every day, you're going to be like a solitary person, right?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, if you have somebody across the table from you and you both have to eat your full body weight every day, there's going to be a lot of fighting over that last cookie.
You don't want to share your food at that point.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca,
You're welcome.
For that report on shrews. Okay, so on to ecological news, and so I'm going to start off with the good news. I'm going to start off with the story that I really like, and this is from Australia, and it's the Bank of Australia has ceased loans for new fossil fuel cars starting in 2025. So it's a bank that has decided we are not going to finance internal combustion engines. We're only going to finance electric cars. So this bank has been pretty forward-looking on the whole climate issue. They got carbon neutral way back in 2011, and now 100% of their activities are powered by renewable energy. But they're saying that this idea of offsetting that so many politicians that we can keep putting in the carbon in the air. We just need to offset it with some trees or something. They've reached the conclusion that that's kind of like a scam, and they have to actually take action to stop more carbon going into the air. In Australia, private cars equal 42% of transport emissions, and if the country has a goal of getting to net zero by 2035. So Australia here, this bank, and this is from this whole thing is from their website, which is bankaustralia.com or bankaust.com.au. Their whole thing is this is a signal to the market, because this is one of the biggest banks in Australia, and they're telling all the other businesses in Australia, okay, we're doing this. Even though right now Australia has an election coming up, and like so many other countries, sadly, they have an ultra right-wing candidate. His name is Dutton, and that party is a global warming denial party. And, despite the fact that Australia is one of the hardest hit nations in the world with global warming, they have incredible heat waves and fires and wildfires. But one thing they also have, they just got hit with a cyclone called, what's a cyclone? Oh, what's the day? Alfred. Yeah, Cyclone Alfred, which hit the eastern coast of Australia. And that is something that almost never happens. The last time the east coast got hit by a cyclone was 31 years ago. And so this Cyclone Alfred has flooded large sections of Australia, eastern Australia. And there's a picture going around on the internet of a huge billboard for this right-wing global warming denier named Dutton. And it's like half submerged because the area where they put this billboard got flooded. So kind of a poetic justice there. So that's a good news story from Australia, that the Bank of Australia has jumped on the save the world side. That's nice. Next, bad news. This is from the New York Times, actually, and also a story from earthjustice.org. New York Times story, March 2nd. Trump moves to increase logging in national forests, which is one of the most understated headlines in history. Because he is not just talking about increasing logging. He has put out an executive order saying that we will log 280 million acres of public lands during the next couple years. And a lot of news places are reporting this number. They just put it out there, 280 million acres. But it's hard to get a concept of just how much land that is. And actually what it is, it's an area equal to about 10 Ohios. So, yeah.
Does the world need 10 Ohios? Maybe one's enough, I'm just saying.
Well, we need 10 Ohios worth of trees,
Oh,
that's
right,
for sure.
yeah.
We cannot cut down that many trees. I mean, it's just suicide because it increases global warming. And as we've reported here on this show so many times, leaving up old growth trees is much more effective. It's the most effective way of dealing with global warming because the old forest absorbs carbon at many times the rate of a clear-cut forest that's trying to come back. And in fact, once you clear-cut, for 20 years, the area that you clear-cut becomes a carbon source, not a carbon absorber, because all that wonderful organic material that gets built up in the soil that the trees create as they grow, all that wonderful carbon stuff evaporates as long as the sun is hitting it. And so until you get a canopy again, until you get the trees so big that the leaves shade the ground, that patch of earth is now putting out carbon instead of absorbing it. So this is an insane executive order, along with many other insane executive orders. And it's not too surprising, though, because Trump's head of the U.S. Forest Service is a fellow named Tom Schultz, and his experience to run the Forest Service. He was a timber executive from Idaho Forest Group, which is one of the largest logging companies in the world. So it's bad news for the earth there. On to another story. We're going to stick with talking about Trump for a couple stories here. This one is March 4th from AP. Trump administration to drop lawsuit against Louisiana petrochemical plant, AP sources say. And there's a company down there in Louisiana called Denka Performance Elastomer Plant. And they put out chloroprene, which is a toxic chemical. And they put it out, according to airborne testing, they put out 15 times the allowable limits. And so the Justice Department under Biden was suing them for doing this. But under Trump, well, one of the reasons they focused on this company in particular is because that section of Louisiana, it's called the Mississippi Chemical Corridor. It's also called Cancer Alley. And that's where 25% of U.S. petrochemicals are processed. And the cancer rates in that Cancer Alley are just tremendous. You know, they rival the cancer rates downwind from the 3 Mile Island accident. And So this was called an environmental justice issue because most of the people who live in the Cancer Alley are people of color and who are poor. And so the law used to say you can't single out people like that to dump on, because that's not only is that bad environmental policy, that's also unjust to always pick the poorest, darkest sections of your state or your city to dump toxic chemicals. So this was an environmental justice suit, but under Trump, literally the words environmental justice are verboten. You're not allowed to even say environmental justice if you're a government official under the Trump administration. This is another executive order he produced. So you can't even say it, let alone have a lawsuit based upon it. And so Trump's going to drop that lawsuit. And Danka performance elastomers get to put more chloroquine into the atmosphere. Next story, it's separate but related, and this one is Trump weaponizing Department of Justice. And the source for this is a Facebook group actually called Alt National Park Service. And Alt National Park Service is an organization where fired federal employees are sort of gathering and sharing information about what's happened to them and to their departments after, as they're being fired. So on March 6th on Facebook, they reported that fraud charges are being brought against federal employees who administer funds for the EPA and other organizations like the USAID. And if they ran a program that the Trump and that the mumps, as I call them, that Musk and Trump, the mumps didn't like, they are being having criminal fraud charges against them, even though they were administering programs that were federally approved, the money was appropriated by Congress, and they're for programs like greenhouse gas reduction and education. And Jamie Raskin, one of the Congress people, calls this campaign dangerous as HE double toothpicks. This is a story on March 7th, because basically what they're also doing is not only are they bringing criminal charges against people who are literally just doing their jobs, they are also intimidating, they're persecuting any lawyers that might come forward to help defend them. They're intimidating them by doing things like denying them security clearance, by eliminating any federal contracts they might have. There's a particular law firm called Perkins Coie, and Trump has already banned them from any federal government contracts, and he stripped their security clearance because he didn't like that they were defending people that he is persecuting. And so that's a new thing in America, the idea that you can prevent somebody from getting legal counsel by scaring the legal counsel off by telling them that they're going to lose the things that they need, the privileges they need to actually practice law. So this is a bad thing. Even if you're somebody who likes the Trump administration, this tactic is just bad. All right, so now let's go to an interesting story. It's kind of got to clear our palate after all that nasty stuff. And I was first turned on to this by a fellow by the name of Anton Petrov, who has a YouTube channel called What Da Math. And usually he talks about astronomical stuff, but he does occasionally dip into biology. And he led me to an article by Ars Technica back on March 17th, 2021. So this is a relatively new thing, even though it's kind of an old story. And the title of the Ars Technica article, Strange Microbe Breathes Nitrates Using a Mitochondria-like Symbiote. And so what this means is almost all eukaryotic cells, almost all cells that have a nucleus and all that stuff, have mitochondria in there, and those once were separate bacteria, but that's what our body uses to metabolize stuff, to actually take the oxygen and mix it with the ADP and create ATP and burn the ATP to give us energy to run our cells. And most things need oxygen to do that. But they discovered in the bottom of Lake Zug, Z-U-G, in Switzerland, they discovered a eukaryote that had a different kind of bacteria inside. And that bacteria is Candidatus azobicus ciliaticola. Ciliaticola. And that's the bacteria, and it uses nitrogen to fix ATP and turn it into ATP. And they're living inside a bigger organism called Plagiopylea. And this is really cool for a number of reasons. One, until 2 years ago, we had no idea you could have organisms that breathe nitrogen instead of oxygen. There's no oxygen at the bottom of Lake Zug. It's completely stratified. That's why they study it. And these, now that we've discovered them, it seems like they're everywhere.
Isn't there also like a very old archaeological site, like Copper Age or something?
In Switzerland,
Lake Zug.
I don't know.
I
quite
could
possibly.
maybe I'm confusing my Swiss lakes. I don't know.
Well, this relationship where this organism absorbed the bacteria apparently only happened like 200 to 300 million years ago.
Okay.
Whereas our cells, the ones that absorbed mitochondria, that hookup apparently happened about 1.5 billion years ago. So,
All right.
so this is a relatively recent thing, and so that's why mitochondria are no longer like separate organisms, but the bacteria inside these Plagiopylea, they're still separate bacteria. They have their own, their own genetic code. They divide and live inside the Plagiopylea, but they're not. Actually, they have reached the point where they can't live outside of it, but they are still completely separate organisms living inside another organism. So that's a really interesting story in terms of evolution, which exists, by the way. All right. Next story. Probably you have seen on your social media, you've probably seen the pictures of the latest SpaceX explosion, right? This was the number 9.
Or like the sound effects.
Yes, that dumped basically spaceship parts all over the Bahamas, literally, I mean, over the entire region of the Bahamas. But their previous one, there was an article.
Glad my friend was out of Bimini by then.
Yeah. Well, if he didn't, well, your friend, if they were still there, they got quite the light show, because I guess it was super dramatic.
Yeah.
Watching this rocket explode and fall back to Earth and burn up. But the previous explosion, the one that just happened in February, Space.com on February 2nd did a story. How much did SpaceX's Starship Flight 7 explosion pollute the atmosphere? And apparently, blowing up spaceships that fall back to Earth causes lots of pollution in the upper atmosphere. In fact, it produced 85 tons of pollution. 45.5 metric tons were metal oxides, and those include aluminum oxide. The other 40 plus tons were nitrogen compounds, and both of them, the NOx's, the nitrogen compounds, and the alumina, cause ozone depletion. And so what's happening is it creates the nitrogen compounds because as they are pushing through the atmosphere and burning up, they create very high temperatures and pressures, and that's what changes the N2 in our atmosphere, which is normally neutral. Nitrogen is N2 is a very neutral atom, but you put it under pressure and heat and mix it with oxygen, and now you've got the NOx's, and so this hurts the ozone, and apparently it hurts it quite a bit, because there was a study done in 2023. This study was called Chemical Impact of Stratospheric Alumina Particles Injection for Solar Radiation Modification and Related Uncertainties. In other words, a lot of the mad scientists that want to do geoengineering think alumina was a good thing to spray into the upper atmosphere, to the stratosphere, to block sunlight from reaching the Earth, to cool the Earth down. Unfortunately, this study shows that doing that also depletes ozone. And in fact, they calculated that just 5 metric tons would cause a 9% depletion in the ozone layer. And each of these Starship explosions just put 40 metric tons of nitrogen oxides into the upper atmosphere. And these things, the alumina particles actually destroy ozone at double the rate of chlorofluorocarbons, the CFCs that we banned way back in around 2000 because it was destroying the ozone. And so we actually, if you get rid of the ozone layer, that means ultraviolet radiation beams all the way down to the surface of the Earth and basically starts sterilizing the Earth. That's one of the ways that Mars got sterilized, is it lost its oxygen, so it lost its ozone, and so ultraviolet radiation hit the ground directly, and so basically destroyed all life. And so these wonderful spaceships that Elon Musk is shooting up into the stratosphere and exploding, and as they burn up and coming back down to Earth, they literally could be threatening us. They could be causing, increased ultraviolet radiation. All right, last story, another sad one, unfortunately. We reported last week about the Open Road Renewables Grange Solar Grazing Project because they discovered, and they were arguing before the Ohio Supreme Court, that even though the majority of the comments were negative, it turns out 80% of the commentators wanted the solar project. And there was just this handful of people that each put in hundreds of negative comments that skewed the results. Well, the Ohio Power Siting Board has ignored that and said because of overwhelming public opposition, they denied Open Road Renewables the permit they needed to put up their solar panel. And the company has abandoned the project, which would have given $5 million a year in taxes to Logan County, which only has an annual budget of $50 million. And it would have given $10 million for all kinds of wonderful things like a new community center and other projects. And it just shows Ohio state government is insane. All right, that's it for our show. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No